Welcome to Book Carnival. My name's Anne, and today we're going to be talking to Bonnie Kistler about her latest book, The Cage. Uh, great, great cover. Get it in there somewhere. There we go. And really an exciting book. It was unexpected. I never knew which way you were going. I'd think one way and you found two or three other ways. I love a book that keeps me guessing and that I can't figure out. So welcome to Book Carnival, Bonnie, and we'd love to hear about it and how it all came about.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, that was exactly my goal, was to keep people guessing, sort of a ping pong match where you're sure, it must be this way, but then something comes along and subverts that expectation. It must be this way and all the way to the end. And I will tell you, since you've read it, that when I was in the process of writing this book, I actually had in mind leaving the answer unanswered, and sort of like the Lady and the Tiger thing, which way is it going to go? Choose your own adventure. But a lot of people persuaded me that would be very frustrating for readers. We need to have the answer. So I provided that in the epilogue.
We would be at your doorway.
Yes, yeah. I can understand the frustration. This is The Cage it's been variously called a psychological thriller, a corporate thriller, office thriller, legal thriller. Thriller, I guess, being the common denominator. It's involves a young woman named Shay Lambert, who is a young lawyer recently hired at this international fashion conglomerate. And their administrative offices are in a suburb of New York. And she is working late on a Sunday night. Also working late or in the office on the same late Sunday night is one of the company's senior executives, a woman named Lucy Carter-Jones, who is the director of human resources for the company. Both women leave their offices at the same time, late in the evening, get on the elevator on the 30th floor, barely drop a couple floors before everything goes dark. Power's out, air compressor's out, the alarms don't work. They are just absolutely in limbo in this dark cage in the elevator. It takes 2 hours before rescue comes and they're able to bring the elevator down to the lobby floor and open the doors. And when they do, Lucy Carter-Jones is dead of a gunshot wound on the floor of the elevator. Shay burst out and tells the waiting police, firefighters, etc., that Lucy had a panic attack when the elevator shut down. She was hyperventilating. She lost her mind. She pulled a gun from her purse and killed herself. The police are skeptical of this explanation. And so Shay makes it her job to persuade them that, in fact, that's what happened, that she is not guilty of murder. And the first third of the book is basically her interrogation at police headquarters, in which she tries to marshal the evidence that would convince them that her version of the story is true. But at the same time, her boss, another senior executive in the company, is working very hard to persuade them that it could not have been suicide, that Lucy would not have killed herself, that it must have been murder. And these two competing viewpoints are going on back and forth. Part 2 of the book, Shay is in jail. The police are not buying her story. And then part 3, she's out of jail, still charges are hanging over her head, but she's out of jail and out for revenge at that point. And that's the last third of the book, is really a revenge drama at that point. But it all involves a heinous corporate crime that Lucy was a party to. And the big question is, as the reader discovers what this crime was, what it was that this fashion company did, was it so awful? Was Lucy so stricken with guilt over what her role was that she would have been driven to suicide? Or was what she did so awful, and Shay found out what she did was so awful, that Shay felt murderous? And that's the dilemma throughout the book. Is we discover what the corporate crime is. Was it a reason for Lucy to kill herself, or was it a reason for Shay to kill Lucy?
I find it amazing. I was thinking about how to interview or discuss the book, because I felt anything I said or asked was going to give something away.
Yeah,
And you did an excellent job of avoiding all of that.
I hope so.
You obviously worked on that description, because what I found was that every time there was something happening, almost the reverse would happen, but it was logical. It made sense. There was nothing pulled out of the air. There was nothing that you used as a gimmick.
Mhm.
All of it could truly have happened as written. Uh, and I found that fascinating, which is what kept the suspense going through the entire book, from the first page to the last.
Mhm.
Just amazing. And you may have to kind of recap, because we did have a couple of more people come in. So as we get into this, you could recap it again. But the number one, I'm claustrophobic. So the idea of a
Uh-huh.
black elevator stuck in the middle of somewhere would send me into an instant panic. I can totally understand that and sympathize.
A lot of people have that
I
kind of fear of elevators, of elevators, even when they're operating perfectly. Or some people will feel claustrophobic. And of course, when it breaks down, that's a fear a lot of people have. You know, I spent my law career working in high-rise buildings. So I spent hours riding up and down in elevators. And I used to have a very different fear than claustrophobia or fear of falling or any of that. My fear was, because I was a litigator, so I had adversaries all over town. And I had a fear of getting stuck in an elevator with an adversary, with one of my opposing counsel or somebody that I'd had, you know, crossed swords with at some point or other. And I used to think, oh, how awful it would be if we got stuck together. And of course, the worst that would have happened is we either would have had an unpleasant conversation, or most likely just, you know, an uncomfortable silence. But, you know, being a novelist, my lurid imagination took that and started to imagine worse things that could happen, and all the way up to murder. So that became my fear. And that's what the genesis of the opening scene of The Cage was the idea of two people stuck in an elevator, not you'll discover, you know, as you read it, that they have reasons for not liking each other, for being suspicious of each other. What would happen when these two people get stuck in an elevator together?
We've got some more coming in.
Mhm.
The I thought, and this is not giving anything away, I thought the setting for the opening with the cleaning people coming and the guard being there, everything being up and up, nothing unusual.
Right.
I thought that was, at first I wondered why, and then I realized it made a great premise for no one else has been here. No one else is doing anything. No one slipped by. You know, they were there, and so they were going to witness all of this. I'm curious, because thank goodness it never happened to me. When you do pick up that wonderful little telephone in an elevator, where does that go? Where does that go to?
That's a good question. Does it just go to the security guard down at the desk, or does it go to some kind of central something or other? In the book, I have the alarm not working. Everything is just, you know, a software glitch of unexplained origin. So Shay actually places a call to 911, and that's how emergency services are contacted. But yeah, in real life, where does that call go? I don't know.
I have no idea. Never wanted to find out.
No.
I grew up in Chicago and used to ride high rises all the time also, and think nothing of it. But I've been a Californian for too long, and there's not that many of them out here. So what you had written a previous book, which was a family drama, basically.
Domestic suspense, yeah.
Yes, and very interesting also. What brought you to this book?
Well, as I mentioned, you know, this elevator scene was really in my mind for years. I had different scenarios. I was, you know, working out. I had a sexual assault at one point. Anyway, I just, you know, this cage always, I guess, sort of fascinated me.
Please go
We're
on.
talking about what drew me to this story. And as I mentioned, the setup of something happening in this elevator was the launch pad. But I was also really interested in the fallout from the 2008 Great Recession and what would happen to young professionals who were bright rising stars in 2008. But then when the economy collapses, they lose their jobs. And because, of course, they're saddled with student loan debt and they are overextended in their mortgage, and so they just really suffered terrible consequences. That's the backstory of Shay Lambert and her husband, and that's why 5 years later, when the action picks up, she is desperate for this job. She's been essentially unemployed or underemployed for the 5 years since the Great Recession, but now it's 2014. She's gotten a job with this law department. Thinking about the people who were laid off, and I knew a lot of bright young professionals who didn't suffer as badly as Shay did, but they lost a step on their climb to success because of circumstances just so far beyond their own control, not their own fault at all. But they never got back on the same rung of the ladder of success. And just thinking about that and the way labor, even when we're talking about white collar labor, high professional labor, gets treated as being fungible, disposable, whenever the economy turns. That's the through theme of this book, is the way labor is treated across the whole spectrum, from the executive suite in a big company all the way down to the lowly factory workers in the sweatshops who are making these clothes for the high fashion company. And that's all those different threads came together into the story.
It really did, and made an amazing book. I couldn't put it down, mainly because I kept thinking it was going one way and it didn't. So I kept having to read and find out how it was going to go. Do you mind, and probably doing it in a slightly different way, recap of the book a little bit?
For the benefit of a few people who were just able to join us now.
Yes, and we're glad they did. But
yes, yeah, welcome. The Cage is a psychological thriller / corporate thriller that is set in the world of an international fashion conglomerate. Two women who work for this company. One is a senior executive director of human resources. The other is a new hire in the law department, a very lowly lawyer. They're both working late on a Sunday night. They both get into the elevator to leave their offices at the same time. The elevator goes only a couple floors before it breaks down, is cast into complete darkness. All the power is out. The alarm doesn't work. The air compressor is off, and so forth. And by the time Shay, the young lawyer, calls 911, and it takes a while for the fire department to arrive and to bring the car down successfully to the lobby level. But by the time they do and they open the doors, the other woman, the senior executive, head of HR, is dead on the floor of the elevator of a gunshot wound to the head. The survivor, Shay, tells the police that she had a panic attack when the elevator broke and killed herself, pulled a gun out of her purse and killed herself. The police are, of course, skeptical of this. And so Shay spends the first part of the book trying to persuade them that she's telling the truth. But certain things in her story don't quite add up. There's inconsistencies. She's what you might call an unreliable narrator, not unreliable in the sense that some books that recently have featured an unreliable narrator where she doesn't remember because she was blackout drunk. That's not Shay. Shay is unreliable because she's deliberately withholding information from both the police and from the reader. And that's why, Anne, when you thought you knew something was going, it's because Shay didn't tell the whole truth when she told part of the story. That's the reason. She is then, the situation is further complicated. Not only are the police already suspicious of her as obviously, the only other person in the elevator, but then her boss, the general counsel of the company, starts working very hard to persuade the police that it could not have been suicide, that it had to be murder. So he is presenting evidence contrary to what Shay is trying to tell the police. So it becomes a cat and mouse game between Shay and her boss, Ingram Barrett, sorry, and as to who's going to marshal the evidence and present it to the police in a way that somebody will be persuaded. And at least in the first instance, Shay loses, and the police do in fact arrest her, and she goes to jail. And that's the middle part of the book, is her experience in jail. And then the last part of the book, she's out to clear her name and out for revenge against her boss.
Thank you. That brings everybody current, and they feel like they're better informed with what's going on and for questions. I have a few questions here. Barbara wanted us to know that she, figure out how to do this. She was in an elevator, worked in a building. She was stuck. Oh, and Lynn was stuck in the elevator at LAX and used the phone, and security picked up immediately and sent someone to open the elevator. And Barbara says, we've all, see, I'm glad I missed all these experiences. Barbara said, when I worked in a high rise years ago, our elevator stopped frequently and the phone went to the security office. I would have used the stairs after that. I do quite often. I have a thing about these office buildings that are built today in California anyway, that are kind of the open air kind. And you have these little tiny elevators that I often wonder if they're really maintained at all.
Mm.
So I usually wind up climbing 2 or 3 flights of stairs. It just feels much better. And we have some of the traditional questions. When did you know you wanted to be a writer? And what books do you read? And who would you recommend?
I wanted to write from childhood and did in fact write. In fact, when I was in 5th or 6th grade, I wrote a teleplay for a TV show I was watching at the time. I was a big fan of the show. I thought, I'll just write my own, and I sent it to them. Found out the address of the studio, and I sent it to them. And they sent it back with a nice note saying they didn't take unsolicited manuscripts. I didn't learn
That's amazing. How old were you?
I would have been 11 or 12, 11. I didn't learn a good lesson from that, because then as a teenager, I wrote a full-length novel. And again, I sent it off to a big New York publisher, unsolicited completely. And it came back, virtually by return mail saying, we don't accept unsolicited manuscripts. But I like to tell that story because the publisher I sent it to, and I don't know why I picked their name out of the air, but it was HarperCollins, who is now the publisher of The Cage. So I feel as though we've come nicely full circle.
Yes, it did. I like
my teenage self feels vindicated. So I always knew I wanted to write. Went to college, majored in English, thought I would be a writer, but I also really wanted to be able to support myself, and didn't want to be the starving artist in the garret kind of situation. So I went to law school, practiced law, but still kept writing as much as I could during my early years, also starting a family and, having a difficult law practice, but I didn't get a lot done, but eventually I did.
Did you specialize in any particular kind of law?
I was a litigator, a trial lawyer, but I didn't represent, as I say, no humans involved. I represented companies. Corporate litigation is what I did.
Okay.
So it would be, like, for example, the shareholder litigation that's involved in The Cage. That would be the kind of lawsuit that I would be involved with.
Okay. That worked out very well. And then the other person asked, what books do you like to read when you have time?
Yeah. And now is actually my big reading time, because I finished my next book, which will be published this time next year. It's off with Harper, and not yet ready to start another one. And because of course I'm doing publicity for The Cage, this is a perfect time to read. So I've been reading like crazy the last couple months and really enjoying it. I read pretty eclectically. I read more contemporary literary fiction than I do traditional mysteries or thrillers, but I do read mysteries and thrillers also. And I've just recently read Laura Lippman, Ruth Ware, a couple of our favorites. I don't read much nonfiction, but I'm right now reading the wonderful memoir by Tara Westover, Educated, and just it's blowing me away. It's just incredible.
Now with this book, because of the legal things involved in it, that perhaps came easy for you, and you didn't have to do a lot of research. Is your next book going to fall into that category, or is it going to involve more research on your part?
My next book the main character is again a lawyer, a woman lawyer who's built her career, a very successful career, defending men accused of sex crimes. And this is her, bread and butter. Athletes and musicians are the people, and she either defends them at trial or more frequently rushes in with a cash settlement and a non-disclosure agreement to shut these women up, which is what goes on in the world. And so this is probably very much a Me Too book. It did not involve a lot of research beyond, because I didn't do a lot of didn't do much criminal defense work at all. I had to become familiar with some of that, but I had to say that's simpler than the complex corporate stuff, and so it didn't take a lot of research. No.
It sounds like an interesting subject, though, and you can see all kinds of things going wrong with that. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you don't want to talk. Do you have a title for it yet, or working?
No, I don't. The title that I had, my working title, was rejected by my publisher. My editor had good reasons for rejecting it. And so we floated several alternatives, and she's launching it internally as we speak at HarperCollins to see what the group thinks, what they're going to weigh in on. So hopefully within a month or so, I will have a title for the next book.
That sounds great. I really look forward to that. And I'm planning to read your first one. I had missed that, but it sounds very interesting also.
House on Fire is the title.
Yes. And that was, how did you describe it? More of a family drama?
Family drama, domestic suspense. Mm-hmm. The main character is again a lawyer, but it's really about what happens in her home. It's about a very happily blended family, husband with his son from a previous marriage. The wife has her children from a previous marriage, and they're all getting along like gangbusters until one night there's a car accident and the daughter of the mother is killed. And the son of the father is arrested for drunk driving and put on trial for vehicular manslaughter. And this tears this family apart at the seams. He has a defense, but the mother doesn't want to believe him. And of course, she's in terrible grief over the loss of her daughter. And anyway, it all comes together.
It also sounds interesting and something that would be very addictive. How about questions from people? You can unmute yourself, and if you have any questions.
When you write, what is your, do you have an outline, or you already know who the culprit is, if you will?
Yeah, I do. I don't have a detailed outline. When I start any book, I always know what the starting premise is. Blended family falls apart, for example, or shooting in a stuck elevator. I know who the main cast of characters are, and I know where I wanted to end up, but I don't always know what points will get me from here to there. So that comes to me often as I write. I don't like to actually sit down and do a detailed outline chapter by chapter. This is going to happen now. And the reason for that is that I get really easily bored. It takes me a year to write a book. And if I knew everything that happened, I think I'd get bored and I'd probably abandon the project. Whereas if I can write along and then think, oh, what if this happens? If I can surprise myself, that keeps my interest going so that I can keep going and not get bored by my book over the course of a year. So I like to keep discovering little surprises along the way. Oh, what if I do this and that ties into that? Okay, let's do that.
Well, and that's exactly what made this book so readable.
And because you said it takes about a year for you to write a book, do you dedicate so many hours a day that you want to focus on writing?
I don't. I am not a disciplined novelist. And I think partly that's a rebellion from my law practice days, because when I was a lawyer, we had to account for our time on timesheets in 6-minute increments. Every
Oh.
6 minutes, I'd have to write down what I did for those 6 minutes. And I think, that was very restrictive. And I think I like in my writing life to have a lot more freedom, to come and go. And what I really like to do is not write until the urge is upon me. I don't like to try to force words. And I know a lot of writers and a lot of very good writers believe in that discipline and think you get the words on the page, you're never gonna, you can't edit a blank page, you could get something down. But in my own experience, if I write something, just, because I have to write something, so I'm going to write my thousand words today, and I go back the next day and I read it and it stinks, I get so depressed that I can't write for several days after that. I'd really rather write when I feel like I've got the words and they're really coming to me, and that's when I sit down and write. So I have an erratic schedule, and that's partly why it does take me a year to do this.
Have you ever found yourself changing the culprit or a major character as the story progressed? You went, oh, wait a minute.
Not major. I think I have, the major points in my mind, but certainly there's lots of minor things that come along.
Mhm.
For example, and if you recall, there's a security guard in this book named Lester, who acts sort of as Shay's paralegal when she's reviewing documents. And I have him being part of the bad guys team. But along the way, I decided, well, maybe he's not. And maybe we'll just have him, maybe we'll switch him up and have him be. And that was fun. That was that was one of those fun surprises that I mentioned, like, oh, well, that makes it more interesting than to have this guy. Now, he was a minor character. I wouldn't have changed a major point, but those kind of little surprises.
Barbara has typed here that you mentioned that your unsolicited manuscript was, of course, not accepted. What was your journey to actually getting published after having a successful law career?
I did what they always tell you to do, which is to get an agent if you want to be commercially published. And the way to get an agent is you send queries. And I was lucky enough to, I certainly went through several rounds, but I was lucky enough to get an agent, and I've been with her ever since. And we have a very nice working relationship. And she then, took it to my last book, House on Fire, was published by Simon & Schuster. But then this one, we went to HarperCollins.
I think that is so, must be so satisfying that it goes to the one that you sent your unsolicited one to as a teenager.
Certainly there's none of the same people involved. It wouldn't mean anything to them, but to me, I just keep thinking, oh yeah, you were the ones who sent back that manuscript, which I think was called Deer on the Hill. I have no idea what it was about. It was some kind of rural noir, probably.
No, it sounds wonderful. I love it when things work out that way. Anyone? Yes, Catherine, please.
How do you create your characters? Do you start with a impression of how they function in the story, or maybe a thought about their voice or their appearance?
Not voice, but definitely appearance. I usually have a visual of some kind, but it's how they function. In this case, because it's a corporate setting, what their jobs are and what motivates them in their jobs. And so I have, HR director, young lawyer in the law department, security guard, general counsel, and then just fleshing it out from there. General counsel, I decided, was a guy who is very waspy, very, white shoe law firm kind of guy, very much into the trappings of his success. He's got the incredibly posh office, with his own bathroom attached to his office, all these perks of his position, and really loves, kind of lording it over people. Shay is, as I mentioned earlier, is just desperate to get a good job again, and is so grateful to be there and to work long hours and to do whatever she needs to do. And so I visualized her, as being the sort of mousy looking girl. She's got just a, straggly ponytail. She's only has one suit because she's had to sell all of her clothes when she lost her job, her well-paying job. And so she's got a real downtrodden look about her, but she goes through a real metamorphosis in this book and sort of reclaims who she used to be when she was a high flyer in a Wall Street law firm, and undergoes a physical transformation. That was fun. That was fun to put her through.
And there were so many things that contributed to that, not just the job or the people that she was working with, but many other things in the book contributed to how she evolved, which I thought was fascinating. And I don't want to say any more because it's like I said, I don't ever want to give something away, but it's a book that I really highly recommend that people read. It is different. It is, you never really know what the next step is going to be in this book. And I admire that so much because I don't find it that often. There are many good books and they're well written, but one that can keep you wondering to the very end, I really treasure. So it's been wonderful.
That was my goal.
I know you've got another book coming. Do you plan to travel with that one? Because of course we'd love to have you in person.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Yeah, we'll see what the situation is next year.
I know.
Knock on wood. For this tour, I'm doing half virtual, but half in person. I am doing some in-person visits here on the East Coast. But, yeah, we'll see what things look like next year.
Yes, I can't tell. I mean, we've already done 2 years of this. Can't predict what the next year will bring, but would love to have you because it's always more fun in person.
Yes, yeah.
Can I, and you can just tell me that it's too revealing, but this is just my naive belief that if I'm around a murder involving a gun, as long as I don't touch the gun, when they do the, that thing to see if
Gunshot residue. Yes.
Yeah, wouldn't I be safe? Or
that's a really good question. And the way Shay explains what happened in the elevator is that when she sees Lucy take the gun out and put it toward her, she grabs for it. She's struggling. They both have their hands on the gun.
Okay.
And so when the forensic team arrives to start the CIS people, she says, obviously my prints are going to be all over that gun. I've got gunshot residue on my hands because I was right there. Forensics will not help you in this case. The other thing is that normally, of course, you can trace the gun. Whose gun was it? Who brought the gun on there? In this case, it's something that you may have been reading about in the news lately. It's called a ghost gun.
Yeah.
It's completely unregistered. There's no serial number. They're manufactured, basically in somebody's backyard.
Yes.
And so there's no way the police are stumped in terms of trying to source this gun to either one of the women.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what made it a question of just comes down to Shay's word, versus does it hold up?
Okay. I have run out of questions, and let's see, where are we?
Who are some of your favorite authors?
Oh, good question.
Good question. Good question. Well, I like one of your Californians, Michael Connolly. I always read all of his Bosch books, although he's really more of a Floridian, I understand. He's down here in Florida. But of course, he was a reporter for, was it the LA Times for many years,
Yes.
where he learned all of his craft. I like him. I like John Sanford is another, police thriller kind of writer. But then on the more domestic side, I read Laura Lippman. I think she's really good. Ruth Ware, I mentioned, I think earlier. They're definitely some of my favorites. But I also like, as I mentioned, I like to read a lot of contemporary literary fiction, and some of those I read. Ali Smith from England, Hilary Mantel. Anybody read the Wolf Hall things about Charles, about Henry VIII? Yes, and So I don't read a lot of historical fiction, but I've really enjoyed those. And Jennifer Egan, A Visit from the Goon Squad, which is about to have a follow-up in April, and I'm so looking forward to that. It's called Candy House, out in April, so I bet it's going to be fabulous.
Very, quite a varied reading.
Yeah, I don't read narrowly.
I have another question. I don't know if this is just like a fable, but I had thought that lawyers, whether they're corporate or criminal, when they're on opposing sides, it's like being on opposing baseball teams or football teams, that there's no personal animus or,
But
that's not
really
true.
I don't know whether it was just me, was I just an antagonistic person? But yes, you always saw that on TV, is that they'd be, going out for a drink after they've just been
Yes.
arguing. They've been at each other's throats in the courtroom, but now they're great. That was never the case with my cases. We always, seem to just carry the bitterness over, and it's a shame. I mean, really, it would be a better world if I could have acted like the TV lawyers, but feelings ran deep in my cases. Even though it was just corporate stuff, feelings ran very deep.
It sounds more realistic to me, quite frankly. I mean, if you're so passionate about a position and it does or does not win, I can't imagine just blowing it off and being able to walk away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you want to tell us?
Oh, I don't think so. I hope that you're able to read The Cage and enjoy it. And I hope that you're as surprised by the ending as Anne was.
And the books went to Bonnie. She's been nice enough to sign them, and they're on the way to me.
Yes.
So again, we will have signed books. This has worked out very well. People got very tired of book plates. Nobody expected this to last this long when people couldn't travel more freely and do things. So it's been a real treat to be able to send the books to the authors, and the authors have all been very gracious about signing. So we have that to look forward to. Bonnie's books aren't at my store quite yet, but they will be.
It will be.
And I thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you for sending them to me. That was wonderful.
And if no one else has any questions, I guess we're going to wish Bonnie farewell and look forward to the next book, which hopefully she'll be able to tour on. We can't go on like this forever.
We said that a year ago, Anne, remember?
Yes,
See you next
unfortunately,
year.
unfortunately, I do remember that. But slowly but surely, it's got to get better.
Hope so.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Bonnie.
having me. And
Thank you for coming.
all of you.
You.
Good night.
It
Good
was
night.
really wonderful. Thanks so much.